Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Amar. Actually covered most of the legal principles involved when the police come knocking on your door. What me and Amar said was that if afterwards, in the Q&A, anybody has specific questions, they can ask us directly, or if somebody wants to talk privately, can you please, we're available as well to talk to you privately. I just wanted to actually, rather than repeat what these guys said, is to just look at a few angles that I wanted you to think about as well, that go along with these raids and what happens when what we call the media circus comes to town. As we said, the media circus, you know, every week there's a different town, there's a different neighborhood, there's a different borough, but there's always a Muslim community, and it provides a good entertainment for the fair industry, and it's a useful way for the police and the security services to go running to the government and say, look, we know you're broke, we know you got no money, but give us more money because we're using a security threat. So it's all part and parcel of the whole thing of politics, economics, and prejudice. And I don't need to tell you guys and sisters about the level of prejudice and Islamophobia that has now become essentially institutionalized in this country, particularly after 9/11, but some would say that started about 10, 15 years before that, and possibly when we had the Salman Rushdie March, when Muslims for the very first time started to assert their Islamic identity. And that's where some people in the know, who know more than I do, will say that that's when the Home Office and various other people started developing strategies. How can we stop this Muslim assertiveness? And that's what it is. In terms of criminality, nobody I know has any objection. If somebody breaks a crime, even if it's your son, even if it's your brother, you know, it's inevitable. Yes, the police will get involved, the courts will get involved. And a Muslim, by definition, is not unreasonable, it cannot be unjust. And the principle that Cage works on is that we must be just. And okay, you know, just an aside point that we criticize the Americans, we criticize the West about the lack of due process, the lack of unfairness. But inshallah, once we're established, once that pressure, that constant attack on Muslims calms down, Cage's, inshallah, ambition is to move more towards Muslim areas, Muslim countries, and say, look, it applies to you as well. You cannot go around torturing people. You cannot go around beheading people. There must be principles of due process. There must be principles of justice. So whether you call yourself Islamic State, whether you call yourself the new Muslim Brotherhood or in Tunisia, whatever, we believe in justice. And I think that's the principle that underlines us all. So that's my point, in the sense that we don't mind if somebody in our families or in our neighborhood has genuinely done something wrong, that the police get involved. And as you know, we always advise that one must obey the law of the land. Do not break the law of the land. We accept a lot of the laws of the land are very unfair, and we continue to raise our voices about those laws. And some of those laws have been modified to an extent. And there are many non-Muslims, academics, lawyers, intellectuals, who recognize that we are being used as a guinea pig for the state and the government to get more and more powers. And what they really means is, with all those powers that they're now being acquired under pretense of the prejudice against Muslims, you watch anybody, well, people are seeing actually, people who, you know, Green Party or climate change activists or animal rights activists, they're suddenly waking up to the fact that actually it's not just about Muslims, it's a power that the state wants to use to control anybody who dissents against its dominant narratives. So that's the kind of games we're looking at. That's what's going on. And right in the middle of all that is, of course, the Muslim community. And unfortunately for this neighborhood, it's your turn. This last week, the circus is in town with you. As I said, next week, maybe somewhere else, and KG will be there. We will fearlessly say to people, well, empower yourself, organize yourself, get together. And this Cage, as Khalid quite rightly said, there's a group of lawyers involved. There's plenty of support. And you've got HUGS, which will support the families and the people, any economic side effects that may come across. So there is support networks there. And my appeal to everybody here is join those support networks. And I know a lot of brothers and sisters here, mashallah, who do some fantastic work. And you could talk to them, or you could talk to us directly how you can organize it in your own community. Now, on a slightly side point, one of the side effects of the police taking interest in a locality is that you will see those people, as Amar quite rightly says, majority of those people get released without charge. But those people and their families suddenly get targeted by undercover police officers, or sometimes by MI5. And you may have seen at Cage where we launched these campaigns about the harassment from the security services, harassment from police officers. So very often what they do is that they'll put pressure on people to talk about other people, tell them what's going on. They call it intelligence gathering. So it's a build a profile in the area, and of course this is the area where there's a lot of money into this, so there's lots of resources being put in there. And as a result of putting those resources in, there's got to be some intelligence that needs to go back to the office where people say, well, actually, we were successful. This explains the desperation of some of the MI5 officers and some of the prevent officers or local undercover officers when they're desperate for some information. The problem is that a lot of people actually don't know anything. A lot of people genuinely don't know. But the level of suspicion of the Muslim community is such that a lot of even half-decent non-Muslims in authority will genuinely do think, albeit mistakenly, that the masjids are the radicalizers. And obviously we know the truth about the radicalization of the mosques. But a lot of people do believe that. So this is why they'll try harder and harder, thinking, well, these Muslims, they're tough nuts to crack. So very often the blackmailing, the pressure will increase quite enormously. And my advice in those circumstances is that there is no problem with an MI5 officer or undercover officer coming to you politely and say, look, would you work for us? Would you help us? And, you know, I say this with a heavy heart, but as a lawyer, practicing English law, I have to say that you're entitled to do that. You know, you have a right to work for MI5. You have a right to work for undercover police officers. So under English law, you are able to do that. That right, that power is limited. The police cannot put pressure on you to work for them. The security services cannot put pressure on you to work for them and give them information, whether you have it or not have it. This is where we say, look, ring the lawyers. And the Cage has helplines. They have a group of people. Anytime you feel pressure, and to me, pressure means the moment a police officer raises his voice, or if the police officer repeats his questions, even though you said no, that amounts to pressure. That's the time you cut off and say, okay, you want to talk to me, let me get a lawyer, you talk to me through my lawyer, we'll deal with you then. And 99%, whenever a lawyer's name is mentioned, anybody, any lawyer, that pressure just goes away actually. Even honestly, they don't even ring the lawyer, that pressure goes away because they know that what they're doing is against the law. They are abusing their power. So there are potentially complaints to be made against them. They could lose their job, or they could be sort of, as you know, Kaleem said, we can get the media involved, we can expose them. So there are ways of combating the immense pressure that comes along with when the media circus or when the sort of police helicopters come into your neighborhood. And then I'll conclude by simply saying that for the families who are impacted, if your doors are broken down, I've never experienced that, so I'm never going to say, like, actually I understand. But having spoken to many, many people who had that suffering, who've been through that, it's an extremely traumatic process. You know, it's a terrible situation. So do not be afraid. You know, don't worry if you're worried, if you're crying, if you're upset. There's nothing wrong with that. This is quite heavy-handed actions of the state. And the police, unfortunately, in many occasions have been known to break the law themselves, whether it's abusing people, whether it's assaulting people. You saw the case with Babar Ahmed, for example, where he was awarded large amounts of money because the police just assaulted him unnecessarily. And this is why I think quite rightly Amar and Kaleem are saying, look, don't create a fuss. Not that other people who were beaten up did create a fuss, but we want to minimize that possibility of any action happening. So please cooperate to the extent where remain calm, and then what you do is, I disagree with Kaleem one thing on the conversation in the car, even about football. Because can you imagine these days, if you say you're a gunner? I mean, they'll misinterpret that as well, do you know what I mean, yeah? So I don't even joke or mess around with them. Honestly, I've seen the police officers deliberately misinterpret things. So just remain calm, remain quiet, and say to them, okay, let my lawyer come, then I'll deal with you. When you've got a lawyer there, lawyers normally tend to be quite experienced, and then you have somebody who's watching and observing whatever the police are doing, and on the whole, the police behavior improves once a lawyer is present. So that's the overall discussion, hopefully that's concluded.